Hey y'all, I'm Hope, and today I'm wrapping up all the books I read in February. Normally I do this as kind of a vlog style thing, but I completely forgot to film that this month, so this is going to be kind of chatty and casual instead. So up first I have the books that I read for the year-long challenges that I'm participating in, which are Buzzwordathon and TBR Knockout. So to start, I read You Should Have Left for Buzzwordathon, the buzzword being words like you, their, yours, he, hers, she, those kinds of words. And so You Should Have Left by Daniel Kelman has you in it. And this one is a kind of very short horror novella about an author and his family as they go up to this remote house up on a hill near a very remote rural village in Germany. And they're there while the author is trying to finish a screenplay that he's been writing that's like a sequel to his most popular movie. And this one ultimately was kind of disappointing. So I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening because it's about this author and his family, and kind of the root of the situation they're in is very dysfunctional family dynamics. They're really struggling at this point, and so this is kind of an effort to bring them all back together while also making sure that he's able to make some money to support them. So like there's that element of it, and then also there's some interesting things around like multiple dimensions and like compression of space and time. I thought that that was really interesting. The other hand of that is that because of the dysfunctional family dynamics, the main character I think is the source of all of their problems. He's just very self-absorbed, which makes him not very fun to read about, and it was hard to root for him and like want him to get out of the situation because 90% of his personality is just being like mad that his wife has a college degree and he doesn't, which I was kind of like, you know what? Fuck you, stay in the house, who cares? Which I don't know if is really the attitude I should have in a book about a guy and his family being trapped in a weird house. I just didn't enjoy reading from his perspective. I can like an unlikable character, I can enjoy that, but I think in this instance he was just so deeply unpleasant to read from that ultimately I was like, you know what, whatever this evil thing is, it should win. The other two books there for this challenge were for TBR Knockout, and the February theme was like short. So the first prompt was to read a book under 250 pages, and for this I read Winter's Dawn by Arden Powell. This is the third book in the Flows Magica series, which is a series of fantasy romance stories, and I really enjoyed this one. I've loved the first two. This was no different. I thought it was really well written. I love Arden Powell's writing. It's just very lush and atmospheric, and they're really good at just like setting a scene and giving you like a sense of place. So I really enjoyed that about it. And this one follows Thomas as he is imprisoned for treason, and he's like a professor of theoretical magic. But he's put in this prison that suppresses magicians' ability to use their magic, and while there, just to like pass the time since he can't do any of his like theoretical stuff, to pass the time leading up to his trial, he ends up kind of striking up a friendship with the person in the next cell over, who is a person named Winter. And Winter is there because they did some things and are a powerful magician. I don't want to say much because that is like a major part of the story, so like what did Winter do? But because of their kind of situation where they're just kind of trapped together, they end up kind of striking up this friendship and spend a lot of time talking to each other. And I just thought this was a really interesting setup for the story. I really enjoyed the ending of this story as well, and I enjoyed following these two characters as their relationship developed. I also really appreciated that Arden Powell's writing held up so well, going from something very fluffy and sweet like the last two Flows Magica books to this, which was much darker and much more serious. So this is a series I fully intend to keep buying every book and picking up every book immediately, and I'm excited because I think Arden Powell's announced they're writing at least 2 more books in the series. I just love this book exactly as much as I expected to, so it was just a good time. I think if you like fantasy romance, the series is definitely worth picking up. Absolutely. The other book that I read for TBR Knockout was The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, which fulfilled the prompt to read a short story collection. And I read this because I'm trying to read the entire original canon, and I absolutely loved this. I'd read one of the stories in here before, but the rest of them were all new to me, and I think, you know, it's a Sherlock Holmes book. It's all just fun. Everything in here is just fun to read, and I enjoy being in this, like, version of London with these characters. It's just an enjoyable experience. I think my favorite story in here is The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, because it feels very much like a side quest in a video game, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But overall, I actually really enjoyed every single story in here. There wasn't a single one in here that I didn't, you know, that I didn't like. The next kind of chunk of reading that I did was all stuff that I read for my Goodreads Choice project, which is basically where I'm reading all of the 2021 sci-fi and fantasy nominees, and I read 4 of them this month. So the first one I picked up was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is actually the book that won, and I'm not far enough into the project to say whether I think this one should have won, but I did really enjoy this one. It's the 4th book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, and I can't talk much about the plot here because that would be very big spoilers for the earlier parts of the series. But this one follows a character from the earlier books, Nesta, and is kind of her growing and healing from the trauma that has, the traumatic events that occurred to her during the earlier books. And I really enjoyed this. I thought the Nesta's journey was really interesting, and I think the thing I enjoyed most about this was that Nesta didn't like change her personality. Like, her growth wasn't a matter of becoming a nicer person, because Nesta is a bitch. That's just true. But it wasn't about her becoming a nicer person. It was more about her kind of figuring out why she was lashing out at the people around her, and kind of figuring out how to use her skills in a way that was productive and, you know, made her happier, as well as, you know, trying to repair the relationships with the people around her. So it was a lot more like that. So she still gets to be a bitch and be like sharp-tongued and mean, but it's in a much more, it's a less malicious thing by the end. I also really enjoyed Cassian, who was her love interest. I enjoyed reading from his perspective in here, because this is dual POV. And my other favorite thing is that Nesta starts a girl gang, and I love all of her friends. They're wonderful. That's all I'm going to say about this book because, again, spoilers, but also I have a vlog coming out soon that has much more in-depth thoughts in it. So I just want to put that on your radar, and I will probably come back and link that as soon as it's up. I'm hoping it'll go up later this month, but it does depend on me reading the other book for the video. So just want to let you know that that is coming out hopefully soon. The next 2 books I read I'm going to talk about together because they're the 2nd and 3rd book in the Blood and Ash series. So this was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire and The Crown of Gilded Bones by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and these were fine. I don't love these. I think that if you like fantasy romance, the series is worth picking up just to see what you think of it, because it is very popular. But I have a lot of issues with the kind of pacing and structure of the series and with the dialogue. There's a lot of very repetitive dialogue where they have like these kind of ongoing jokes, but rather than it being like a running joke, it's like every time they talk to each other they have to like make fun of Poppy for having questions, and like Cass has to say something weird about how he likes it that Poppy's violent. Like every single conversation you're getting some version of that, and that gets very old. Yeah, I just think that the pacing and structure needed some work. That being said, The Crown of Gilded Bones is my favorite in this series, which I think is kind of contrary to a lot of people's opinions. A lot of people thought this was the weakest book. I think it's the strongest. I think it has the best character development. We get a lot more side characters that I really enjoy. I particularly like Kieran and his family, and I really like Valen and Eloana in this book because we finally get to meet them. So I love the side characters in this book. I think it has the most plot and the most like reveals of all the books. So ultimately, I think Crown of Gilded Bones is the best book so far. I probably will continue with the series. It's never going to be a favorite for me, I think. Again, I have another vlog for this one. I actually read, or I did like a vlog as I was reading the whole series, so I'll link that in the description and in the cards above. So definitely check that out if you're interested in hearing more about that series. And then the last book that I read for Goodreads Choice also is a video that just came out, so again, link in the description, link in the cards above. But this one is Remote Control by Nydia Okorafor, which I think was the book I was most nervous to get to on the list, because I've previously read from Nydia Okorafor. I tried to read the Binti trilogy, and I read the first book, and I liked it, but I didn't love it. It felt a little bit too convenient at the end, and then I ended up DNFing the short story that goes between the first and second novellas. And I just have found that ultimately disappointing because I really wanted to love Binti because it had so many elements that I think I should have loved. But there were just some issues with, again, kind of basically things feeling very convenient that I just wasn't enjoying. And I found that although I liked the books when I'd read them, or like I liked the first book when I read it, when I wasn't reading it, I just had no desire to pick it up. So I was very nervous going into Remote Control, and I found out I loved it. I actually really enjoyed it. I really like Sankofa as a character. She's kind of a younger protagonist. She's like 14 or 15, I think. It gives her an interesting perspective on the world. She's got a lot of interesting things to say. I also really enjoyed the kind of futuristic version of Ghana that the book is set in. There were a lot of really fun elements here, and I also think that Nnedi Okorafor's writing is just really nice. It just has a really nice quality to it, and she's able to swing between like very poignant things and like very horrific things very cohesively. So I just really enjoyed this one, and I am looking forward to picking up some of her other books. I think in particular I really want to pick up Who Fears Death, but this kind of made me more convinced that I can like her work. There's just so many of her stories, like the premises for her stories are just really interesting. So I'm really glad that I have like read one now and gone like, oh okay, I can really like her work. So I'm more hopeful going into some of her other books now. But those were all the Goodreads choice books I managed to tackle in February. The other things that I read mostly are just kind of random. One of them was one of my challenge books of the month. This is the first one. It was The Cardigans, which I read for the Crow of Judgment card. This one is a crime procedural following Malcolm Kalaji and Song Jae-yoon, who kind of unexpectedly get partnered up to solve a case of serial killings. I really enjoyed this one as well. It's another one with a mystery. It gives you enough clues that you could figure it out on your own, but you aren't necessarily going to. I kind of knew where it was going, but I still like missed parts of it. And I just really enjoyed the dynamic between Kalaji and Songjae. They have very different strengths, and I liked that although they didn't want to be working together, they didn't like hide information from each other or just like refuse to communicate. They were like, we don't want to be in this situation, but the easiest way to get out of it is to just get through with this case. And so they really worked hard together, and their different strengths worked really well together. And so there was a lot about them kind of figuring out that they're really good as a team, and figuring out how to draw on each other's strengths as they went throughout the story. Because Kalaji is very good with people, he's very intuitive, he's good at forging connections, and Songjae is very good at like logic and kind of looking at things from a different angle. So they work really well together, and I really am looking forward to reading the other books in the series. This is a long-running series called Criminal Intentions that's formatted like a TV show. So every episode is like an episode of a TV show. And I'm just very excited about this. It has big Criminal Minds vibes, and Criminal Minds is like my favorite TV show ever, so I'm very excited to keep reading in this series. The next book I read was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this one is very different from what I usually read. This is like kind of a literary fiction thing, but it follows Keiko, who is this woman who works in a convenience store, and she's kind of finding that she's got a lot of social pressures on her. Her family and her friends and kind of the other people in the store are wondering like, why isn't she getting married? Why isn't she finding a boyfriend, getting married? Why isn't she looking for a more career-oriented job versus this kind of dead-end convenience store job? But Keiko really likes her life. She likes having the structure of being in the convenience store all the time. She doesn't really have any interest in finding a marriage partner. She just doesn't want that for herself. So this book is about Keiko kind of dealing with the social pressures and kind of figuring out what she wants and how she's going to live her best life. So I really enjoyed following Keiko. She's a very strange character, and parts of this book do get quite dark in some of the things that Keiko thinks about, but I thought that this was just really fascinating character study, and I think I'm going to get more out of this book upon reread. In particular, there's this element of Keiko's thinking where she's like, people are just a conglomeration of other people. Like, we tend to draw on, you know, the people around us and how they speak and how they dress, and every person tends to change in a way to mimic the people around them, and so every person's personality is just a mixture of the personalities of the people around them. So I thought it was a really interesting concept, and I definitely want to reread this and kind of revisit those ideas, but I just think that Keiko has such a unique view of the world, and I ended up really enjoying reading from her perspective, and I was really surprised how much I liked this because it is extremely different from the things I kind of tend to pick up for myself. After that, I listened to an audiobook, and it was For the Library of the Dead by Teal Huchu. This is one that I loved so much I went out and bought myself a copy, and I'm really looking forward to the sequel. But this one is set in Scotland, and it follows Ropa, who is this kind of 14 or 15-year-old who has dropped out of school to become a ghost talker, which means that she basically conveys messages for ghosts. Ghosts can come to her and be like, hey, can you tell my mother X? Or can you find my husband and tell him this? Or can you, like, let my family know that I think X? And so there's a lot of interaction with ghosts in here that I thought was really fun. But Ropa is working this job as a ghost talker, and as a result ends up meeting a ghost who's like, hey, my son is missing. Can you find him? I can't rest until he's found. And so she gets kind of pulled into having to look for this missing kid. And it's really just a fun mystery story. There's a lot of fun stuff with Ropa and her friends. She has a couple of friends who end up helping her throughout the book. And you also find out about the Library of the Dead and how that fits into things, how the existence of it kind of plays into what's happening. And then also there's the other half of what Ropa is doing is trying to care for her grandmother and her little sister. So I just think this has a lot of really fun character relationships. I particularly love the relationship between Ropa and her grandmother. The grandmother is really cool and I like her a lot. And I also really like Ropa and her two friends. So this was just really fun to read, and kind of similarly to Sankofa, I really liked getting this perspective on the world, this early to mid-teens perspective on what the world is like. I'm not really sure what time period this is set in, because they've got like cell phones and things, but it seems like it's a little bit futuristic or maybe a little post-apocalyptic. I'm not really sure, but there were a lot of interesting world building elements that were slowly being built up, and I'm hoping to get more information about that in the future books. But I just really enjoyed reading from Ropa's perspective, and I thought that the case around the missing kids ended up being like really spooky and really interesting, and there were lots of other kind of like fun side adventures as well. And then the last book that I read was The Appeal by Janice Hallett, which is very different from the last one. This one is a mystery story that's told in a mixed media format, so it's all done through like emails and flyers and text messages and instant messages and things like that. And it follows a group of amateur actors. They have like a theater company, and they do like community plays twice a year, I think. In the course of producing, which play is it? All My Sons by Arthur Miller. In the course of producing this, they end up finding out that the director's granddaughter is ill with cancer. And so the director and his wife kind of set up this crowdfunding thing to try and raise money so that she can get this kind of experimental treatment for her cancer. And it's about the way that the community rallies around them and about some questions that arise out of that fundraiser. And so this has a lot of like different mysteries happening, because there's like questions about the fundraiser, there's a murder, there's like somebody's kind of dark past coming to light. So there's a lot of different mysteries, and I really enjoyed the ways that this wove together. I also think, again, with the other mysteries I've mentioned today, this is one where you could figure it out for yourself. You have all the clues in front of you, but it's about, you know, how well you read between the lines and how well you pick up on like the different details and clues here. So I think this one was absolutely just a ton of fun and so worth picking up. I'd heard some mixed reviews about it, but ultimately decided to just dive in and see what I thought. And I really enjoyed this one. I enjoyed the mixed media aspect. I found it very quick to read and just very compelling. So I'm very much looking forward to reading some more from Janice Hallett. I know she has another book coming out, or rather it's out already in the UK. I don't know if it's getting a US release, but it's called The Twyford Code, which I think it also has mixed media elements. I think that one is like transcripts of audio recordings or something. So I really enjoy the kind of unusual format of this book, and I thought that the way that she kind of wove this mystery together was really fun. But those are all of the books that I read in February, and I'm really pleased with my reading month. It was, I think, the most books I've read this year, the 2 months, and it's the most pages I think I've read since I started paying attention to how many pages I read. I ended up reading something like 3,200 pages. I have my spreadsheet open, I could just look at it. 3,500, I read 3,500 pages, which is way more than I usually read. And I was really happy about that, because I didn't think I was gonna manage that, especially in a short month. But that's basically everything I have for you today, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you did, I hope you'll consider giving it a like and maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting every Saturday, so there is more content coming soon. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!